Thinking Basketball Podcast. My name is Ben. Welcome back to our first playoff show of 2023. And Cody, if the rest of the playoffs are anything like the first weekend, this might be our last playoff show because one has to do things other than watch basketball to survive, like sustenance and maintenance and sleeping and eating and exercising and things like that. And I just could not take my eyes off of what was, for my money, this has got to be like my 30-something opening playoff weekend in NBA history, and right up there with the very best of them, game after game. Where should we start? How are you doing? What is the plan of attack here to make sense of everything that we just saw?
I think the thing, if I had one criticism of an almost perfect weekend, the first two games of the weekend, what were they? It was the Sixers and the Nets started us off.
That was a warm-up. That was an amuse-bouche. To open up the palate.
We had two warm-ups because then we went to Atlanta, Boston, which was, I don't know, semi-interesting, but I feel like I went in too hot. I was excited, and then I just got like by the time we got to the Clippers Suns yesterday, I couldn't write anything. I was just zoned out, jump shot, rebound. There's nothing else that I could just process. It was just too much.
Your mistake was you watched the Celtics and the Hawks. You needed to detox a little. You needed to warm the legs up and then let someone else have a go. Let the Celtics and the Hawks fans do a lap in that game. Maybe tune in for, half a quarter or something. Because what was the third game? The third game starting to get that Knicks Cavs. Oh boy, we got to talk about that. And I did not expect to get to the end of the playoff, not even the end. The Nuggets played after the Clippers and the Suns. I did not expect to be here on the first weekend going full standing in front of the TV mode. You're pacing in front of the TV. You ever have that? Oh man. Here's what I want to talk about today. Yeah, let's rein us in and get some control. I can see the comments already coming in that we are unorganized and all over the place. I think we need to discuss if anything changed for you after the first weekend. If anything changed for you. We talked about it privately last week before the playoffs tipped, and I shared my sort of assessment of each series, my handicapping of each series for Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. And I think obviously there are three series that are really hard to call or could go either way. Some people disagree. Some people say that the Warriors are going to sweep the Kings. I'm not going to say Dave Dufour's name or anything from the last episode. And I'm sure there's people who disagree. Maybe some people think the Clippers and the Suns are a tough call or whatnot. But for me, I really struggled with three of them. And then, of course, we got some really interesting results in a few of the other series that we'll discuss. So, what changed, if anything, for you based on where you were Friday and where we are today recording on Monday after one game in each series? That's maybe the perspective I want to take today.
Well, I'm gonna leave Milwaukee, Miami to the side for a second. That's a whole other. That's got to be bracketed. That's in the parking lot. We might not even talk about that series. It's just that's its own thing, right? I think the actual series where I'm swaying a little bit more than I expected was, and I know we disagreed on this before the playoffs started, was Cavs-Knicks. Because I was on the Cavs side of things. I thought the Cavs were going to take this one down. I did not trust the Knicks going into the playoffs, and I know it's one game, but then you look at the stat sheet, right? I kept writing down in my notes. I kept being like, all right, if Julius Randle keeps making these shots, they're going to do fine. And he didn't necessarily have the most efficient sort of night, and he kind of created a lot of contact and created a lot of offense that way. But the fact that Emmanuel Quickley didn't have a great game, Quentin Grimes didn't have a great game. When those couple of things happen, I'm like, ooh, there's a lot of room for the Knicks to grow. Even though Darius Garland, I don't think he took a shot in the fourth quarter. That's definitely not something you want to see from your one of two functional offensive players. Evan Mobley shot 30% from the field. The amount of layups that team missed between Karis LeVert, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, both teams have a lot. Yeah. They have a lot to grow on, but I felt better about the Knicks after game one.
First of all, I've tried to tell you this, that's a standard Julius Randle fourth quarter right there. He was cooking in the first half, as you'd expect, and I'm at the point with him where if he gives me 2 or 3 makes in the fourth quarter and only one turnover, I think that's That's a solid Julius Randle fourth quarter. And of course, coming back from injury, one thing for me going into this series, first, I didn't think his injury would be that big of a deal because the first two games are on the road. So the worst case scenario is something like he misses the first two games and you're down 2-0, which isn't great, but at least it's on the road and you can kind of work your way back from that. But second, man, I just believed in the Knicks, whether he played or not, because I think it's a good matchup for them against the Cavs. And the really interesting development in that series, because first of all, the Cavs are very good, and they could have easily won that game, and be one step closer to advancing. Because I do think this is going to be a tough series for both teams. But the big question is who's going to shoot threes? Who's going to play the small forward position? It was exactly what I thought we would see from the Knicks defensively. Sagging off shooters, ignoring the small forwards that they put out there. And Cody, I'll almost say it was even more extreme than I thought it was going to be. You got pangs of discomfort watching some of the Cavs players just be completely Andre Roberson in the corner. I'm changing my mind on what I said about Andre Roberson the other day. I said, we give him a hard time. No, this is a great way to memorialize Andre Roberson in the Matisse Thybulle category of one-way players, an amazing defensive player, and I'm just going to keep using him in honor of his greatness as someone who was so good defensively that he stayed on the court, and the Thunder just ate his lack of shooting. Anyway, I don't know how much the Cavs can digest a lack of shooting on their end, so that'll be the big question. But it was a very close game. I still think it's going to be a tight, competitive series, but I was leaning Knicks before they started, so that wasn't one for me that looked very different than what I thought it was going to be.
I think you hit the nail on the head here, because we talked about we had an episode, I think, where we really broke down the Cavs offense a little bit, and we talked about just how few of their players have hit even 40% of their wide open threes. I think Darius Garland, at that point, it was only Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell that had done so, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was the same. I don't think I counted Dean Wade at that point because he had only played 700, 800 minutes in that point in the season, but the amount of record scratch offensive possessions where it just kind of ends up in like Isaac Okoro's hands in the corner. And then everything's just like, what's going to happen next? Is he going to drive? Is someone going to pop out and try and reset the action? And, something that kind of bothers me, Ben, there were a few times where somebody made what looked like a really nice pass to the corner. Like they throw like a nice little no-look pass, and it's like, wow, that was a really slick quick kick out. But it's like, yeah, the kick out's wide open. That's what the defense wants you to do. Like, that's not impressive. That's exactly what they're trying to do. And I think there's this element that's like you're trying to be unselfish, but you kind of actually have to be selfish to go against what the defense wants you to do. And so I think that the strained relationship between that third perimeter player for the Cavs and the three-point shot, that's going to be a huge issue. And I don't know. What do you think? Are they just going to have to play Dean Wade like 40 minutes to get any kind of shooting there?
I thought Jetty in game one maybe looked like the guy who could shoot kind of the least worst while also not being exposed defensively. Like, it's like a balancing game. You want to have as much shooting as you can get from that position without creating a defensive problem. They just don't have a lot of depth. I mean, they don't have a ton of options off the bench in this case. One of the things we were batting around was, can they limit Jared Allen's minutes to create more spacing? But they just don't have a lot of options. It's not like they have smaller forwards or, I don't know if a lineup with like LeVert and Osman or one of the other forwards would really do the trick. So it's tricky. The flip side, of course, is Cleveland's bigs and their size and Evan Mobley make them a great defensive team, and that's why they were right in the game, and it'll be interesting to track the offensive ratings in that series. Okay, we got to get to another series. Let's start with the one that I think I texted you like 8 minutes into the first quarter, and I said, I am rethinking my assessment of this series. Lakers, Grizzlies. I was on the fence until about the 11th hour, and I just kind of thought between the Lakers' health problems and the Grizzlies' pace and kind of success of their role players and the home court advantage, all of that probabilistically, I was like, I'm going to lean Grizzlies. I believe in Ja's ability to get into the paint, and I believe in Jaren Jackson's ability to perform in the postseason on both ends of the court. In game one, I think we saw Ja's ability to get into the paint and Jaren Jackson's ability to perform on both ends of the court. And basically, before the first quarter even ended, I was like, oh man, this is a better matchup for the Lakers than I thought. Because to me, the lack of size for the Grizzlies and the lack of depth on their front line, I really underestimated that piece. Not that I didn't think Steven Adams, just to be clear, not that I didn't think Steven Adams wasn't valuable or that his offensive rebounding wouldn't be missed, but it's more about who's next on the bench. And it doesn't feel like a Santi Aldama series to me. And then there was just no one left. Like, who are they going to have guard Anthony Davis, and who are they going to have guard LeBron James? We can talk about LeBron because his opening game was interesting, but either way, that just felt like a problem throughout the game for Memphis. And I think Memphis is good enough that it was a close game. They were in a position to win. Another epic game that was just like back and forth, tactical stuff. Anthony Davis getting a stinger, coming back. John Morant with the injury at the end of the game. His x-rays are negative, so hopefully he'll be back in the series and everyone's at full strength. But, Austin Reeves just taking over down the stretch, and this tight back and forth game ends up with the Lakers winning by, I think, 16 on ending the game on like a 16-0 run in the final 2 minutes. That was like the third or fourth best game of the weekend.
I was going to say, I'm a little disappointed in us and not starting with the actual game of the weekend, but that's okay. We got to warm up to it a little bit.
We're gonna build up to that, and people get very upset for some reason when we talk about the Warriors or the teams in the NBA Finals. So we're just going to save that for later.
Am I a wet blanket, Ben, if I'm not quite as confident in the Lakers' chances this series as you are?
No, I don't think it's a wet blanket. I'm just saying, to me, this was a really tough series to call. Maybe my impressions from reading some other stuff and listening to some other shows was, a lot of people were excited about the Lakers. For me, it was still very tough. And I just thought, number one, and again, knock on wood, knock on whatever you're listening to, knock on any object that approximates wood, get Chat GPT to knock on wood for you. Anthony Davis looked amazing physically in the first quarter of that game. And that was one of the huge reasons that I was like, oh, I like the Lakers' chances more than I thought 24 hours ago because of that combination of how good he looked and the fact that Memphis, I am blown away. I really dropped the ball, I feel like, for myself analytically with just how little they have on the front line. We're talking about David Roddy or Kenny Lofton Jr. or the stars of the Memphis Hustle, like coming in and it just didn't seem to be an option. Zaire Williams is nowhere to be found. And he was like getting big playoff minutes in big games last year. So the combination of those two things, Cody, with AD and Memphis, and then the Lakers role players. Now, Rui Hachimura is not going to have the game of his life every game, but the weird thing about the Lakers is they've got like 5 or 6 players that can go for 20. They have these guys that have strengths and weaknesses, and I think especially with Troy Brown and Rui, they're big and they've had good defensive minutes, and if they're hitting a decent amount of their shots, now you get to do stuff like, oh, we're not going to play D'Lo because his shot isn't falling, or this is a Reeves lineup. We're going to have, Reeves literally just kind of took over the game down the stretch, and LeBron James maybe looked the worst I've ever seen him look. He's obviously the oldest he's ever been. I mean, that's a profound statement, but he also is coming off of injury, and it didn't even matter to me. It's just like, oh, yeah, I probably should have leaned Lakers instead of leaning Memphis. That was my takeaway from game one.
So, okay, I think when it comes to the Grizzlies, the way that they performed in my mind is how I think they'll be able to perform throughout the entire series. Like, save for whatever happens with Ja, like We're all obviously hoping he's able to come back and he's healthy. The NBA is better when superstars can play. But still, it looks like they're able to do what they're going to do. And everything they did on the court, I'm like, okay, this is going to be the Grizzlies team. But the Lakers, what I can't get over is there's kind of almost like 4 or 5 things that are pushing and pulling against each other where I'm like, I don't know what's real and I don't know what's fake. Like Rui Hachimura, for instance, he's not going to score 29 points in 29 minutes again. Ben, this man, like 5 for 5 from 3 at one point. Turned around like 18-footer in someone's grill. Ben, he took Jaren off the dribble and hammered it on his head. That would listen, we might rank like our favorite moments of the weekend. That's either in it or it's competing, right? That's incredible.
That didn't even make your top 5 plays. I can't believe you're misleading the people, right? Now, Cody sent everybody a top 5 plays of the weekend, and the Rui Hachimura dunk was nowhere to be found.
When I was rethinking about it on my drive home today, it does make my top 5. We can rehash that a little bit later. So that's one thing, right? And then we have Austin Reeves. We know Austin Reeves is a great player, but what? He had 14, 16 points in the fourth quarter? Like, LeBron was just like, take over, young man. Like, do whatever you have to do, and he looked incredible. The behind-the-back pass was maybe the most confident behind-the-back pass I've seen in months. Like, that dude knew it was going to hit its target, right? So I'm not 100% trusting those two things. Anthony Davis, he had 10 stocks this game, 7 blocks, 3 steals. However, Ben, I thought his movement patterns, like you said, they looked incredible. So I feel like the defensive performance in general, I think he can keep that up, right? So I think that's something that's going to stay consistent as Anthony Davis, if he stays healthy, is going to be a defensive monster. But like you said, Ben, LeBron, first of all, Ben, is this the loudest 3 blocks in NBA history? The loudest 3 blocks that was not indicative of how probably bad he was at certain times on defense.
Yeah, well, he's still moving well in a straight line, especially when he can accelerate himself. I think the older you get, maybe I'm just speaking from personal experience, the acceleration and deceleration part of your movement patterns are tricky. And he at one point had this crossover in the first half that was like the slowest, most old man crossover I've ever seen from LeBron. So changing directions on defense. He had this one sequence with just a terrible turnover. Then he didn't close out to the corner to Luke Kennard, the greatest open shooter. Like, the guy uses the force to put the ball in the basket. It's so accurate. And then came down, and I think the worst pass I've ever seen LeBron throw. He threw a behind the back. He was trying the Luka Doncic hedge pick and roll behind the back pass, threw it off somebody's leg. I don't even know the purpose of the pass, even if it got through. Anyway, all that is to say, I think LeBron's sort of overall play, long-term prognostication might, in a sense, have more to do with how far this Lakers team can go if Anthony Davis is going to play like this, whereas I think they can win the series with him playing just like he did in game 1. I don't think that's an issue because the rest of the roster has strengths. I mean, we got our classic 23 minutes of Jared Vanderbilt hounding around, and it wasn't even a big Jared Vanderbilt game. And they have these other guys that can contribute. So I don't know, but I don't think you're being a wet blanket because Memphis still got out in transition. Desmond Bane had a great game. I think that athleticism and speed can be a factor. So it's still to me a very close series, but that was the big one for me in terms of like, ooh, this might go the other way versus what I thought.
You know who really impressed me? Jaren Jackson impressed me. Obviously, the defense is great, but some of those post-up bends, like I know he's strong enough that he's just, able to just throw smaller defenders like into the basket. But the Lakers were really trying hard to front him at times, and I actually thought there were a couple possessions when LeBron really fought to front Jaren. I think the Grizzlies tried to force it in, and they forced a couple of turnovers that way, and I'm like, yes, this is the way to get it. But if Jaren got it with LeBron on his back, it was over. Like, Jaren was showcasing some really good patience. There were a couple plays where he kind of got into the paint and pivoted, and I was like, oh, this looks like it's going to be a turnover, a forced shot. And then he kind of spun one extra way and finished, and I was like, ooh, I like that kind of patience. So this is a big eye-opening Jaren Jackson offensive game for me.
Cody, I just want to take this time to observe Anthony Davis. There was a time when I used to get many, many messages from the internet about how biased and in love I was with Anthony Davis because I thought he was good at basketball. When he was in the bubble, He was the only person I saw really bam, bam. We talked about this before. Bam would give it to people, and then Anthony Davis just like reduced Bam to shrink wrap. Jaren Jackson yesterday looked like a mutant when Anthony Davis wasn't there, and then Anthony Davis just dominated him whenever. It was the craziest thing. It was like, well, Jaren can't score on AD, but if AD goes out, then no one can stop Jaren Jackson. Jaren Jackson absolutely bully ball abusing LeBron James in the post. I mean, that's a sentence I don't think I've ever said about anyone ever. I just want to insert that as a reminder of Anthony Davis, who's not even at his peak right now, just how good he is and how interesting that dimension is if he can continue to stay healthy. Okay, where should we go next? Is there another? Did the Clippers catch you off guard? Because the thing about that series that's interesting to me is, yes, we can have a referendum on the Clippers. There's a whole Russell Westbrook angle because he played the most fascinating game maybe of his whole life, just Westbrooking it up with 3 of 19 shooting. You know, he had one possession where he like yoked a three, missed it, got his own rebound, and instantly took a fadeaway bank shot from 15 feet, bricked them both. That's how you get up to 3 for 19. But on the flip side, everything else that he did, this is like the idealized Russell Westbrook going back to UCLA with the rear view pursuit on defense and the insane offensive rebounding. And of course, the play of the game where Devin Booker is complaining to the official as he blocks it and then throws it out of bounds off of him. So we can do the Clippers angle, but there's a ton there with the Suns as well.
This, I have a couple analytical things. Like I said, this is when my eyes started glazing over on the weekend, where it was just like jump shot. Like, I don't know what's happening at this point anymore. But here's the thing I will say, Ben, is Russell Westbrook and at times Donovan Mitchell were absolutely coming at us personally for leaving them out of the motor conversation, because both of them were just shot out of a cannon. And I know Donovan Mitchell wasn't on the same level as Westbrook. Westbrook was everywhere. I want to go back and give Mitchell his flowers, because I thought he was just revving the engine all over the place in that Knicks-Cavs game. But yeah, Westbrook, just that block and save into Booker, another one of my top 5 favorite plays of the weekend. Just incredible. Another one, Ben, the Chris Paul offensive rebound nutmeg, I think, to Torrey Craig for the layup. Like, these are just incredible high level plays. But I think like one of the main takeaways that I just couldn't get away from with this game was the amount of just like either back cuts or just like simple general cuts that the Suns couldn't keep up with. Like, the Clippers would run some kind of action, there'd be a back screen or someone would make a back cut, and then they would just be open for a lob. I think there was one sideline out of bounds play where I don't even remember who it was, but the Clippers just like walked to the basket and got a layup out of it. So I think defensively, the Suns were really out of sorts, and I think the Clippers really needed that, because when they went through their like necessary one rough patch of terrible offense, it's rough, Ben. When this team gets cold, they go really, really cold. So I'm interested to see how much the Suns can shore up their defense.
How is Kawhi Leonard so good at basketball?
Oh, my God.
Have you done an investigation?
I mean, like, I have my people out there, like, asking questions and whatnot, but I'm waiting for a couple of weeks for the tally.
Can someone commission Rob Perez to do a wobstigation into what is like Kawhi Leonard? There are weaknesses. I've talked about them a lot over the years, but just as a playoff scorer, we've discussed how incredible he is before. But that performance, there's something, I don't know if his facial expression or if his movement patterns create this like stoic effect in our mind where it feels more impressive. But he just, I think someone said it this morning. He just terminated. He was just the Terminator out there. It just looked effortless. He's like, oh, okay, Kevin Durant, you think you're better than me at basketball? We'll see. We'll see what happens at the end of the game. And of course, I'm someone who thinks Kevin Durant has probably been better than Kawhi at basketball for most of their prime years. But I mean, that dude was just he was amazing yesterday, and it'll be really interesting to see going forward if he can just play at like this demonic, I'm going to get 40 on efficient scoring level with everything else that the Clippers have going, how much they can push this team. Because I want to talk about the Phoenix side, Cody. You mentioned defense, okay? The Suns have only played 8 games together. And those 8 games, for the most part, weren't really competitive. They weren't against like playoff teams. They were like, we're going to play the Hornets, or we're going to play some team who's sitting there. I can't remember. They play the Nuggets and they sat their entire rotation. It was a lot of that. They didn't really have a lot of competitive games down the stretch. So you only have 8 games with Durant. Ty Lue talked about throwing them different looks just to challenge their cohesiveness, their communication, the variability and versatility of their sets and of their principles, because they're, relatively new in terms of playing together. And then there's the element with the Suns' depth, of course, that we talked about in the preview show last time going into the series. But here's the big one for me. Really jumped off the screen, and it also jumps off the stat sheet if you pull up the box score. They took an unbelievable amount of mid-range jumpers. And this is the thing. Like Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, I don't know if he missed a mid-range shot. It was just touch city for him from like 8 to 14 feet. And of course, Kevin Durant, one of the GOAT candidates in that category as well. And if you look at the stats, Durant ended the game with like 70% true shooting. But the other guys, Ayton, 53% true shooting, Booker, 58% true shooting, Chris Paul, 39% true shooting. Cody, they took 19 threes in the whole game. They didn't make 19 threes. They took 19 threes in the whole game. And if you get to the line a ton, if you get layups and dunks, in today's day and age, you got to score 115 points per 100 or whatever it is to be competitive. That works. But they just didn't quite have that. And it was a very close game, and of course it could have gone either way down the stretch, so I don't want to make it sound like if the Suns won the first game that there would be panic. I'm not panicking, but that's what jumped out to me. It felt like Phoenix had moments where they got what they wanted, or they were very successful, but after a while I was like, boy, they're going in 2s, and the Clippers are going in 3s. Now, the Clippers only shot 10 to 31 from downtown themselves. They didn't shoot the ball particularly well, but they did take 31 threes. Phoenix at 19 threes. I mean, what year is it? Is that like a 2007 game? 19 three-point attempts. So that's, to me, what to watch for in game 2. And I don't know, the Suns are fascinating because we just haven't seen them that much. We have no gauge on sort of how elite they actually are.
Yeah, I'm looking at their box score right now. Nobody on Phoenix's bench made a 3. Every single one of their made 3s was from a starter. Devin Booker wasn't one of them because he went 0 for 3. That's not good. Like, I don't know. I didn't pull it up, but I would like to see how many times a team won this year when their bench didn't make a 3. Like, I feel like the number would be pretty low. But like you said, there were a lot of mid-range jumpers that the Suns took. And I think, he wasn't quite in our rim protector or our paint protector category, but I think we both like Ivica Zubac as a rim protector. I think he's got great hands. He's got great size. And when he plays drop defense, I think he's pretty integral to how the Clippers play defense. And so I guess my question to you, Ben, is do you think that the amount of mid-range shots that the Phoenix Suns took, or the lack of three-pointers, was that part of their game plan, or were they playing into the Clippers' defensive scheme?
Oh, I think it was part of the Clippers' game plan. I think it's the present. You have to give Zubac credit. We've talked about him all year, how key he's been for them. But also, part of that game plan is these guys like to take long 2s and mid-range 2s. That's the sweet spots for a lot of these players. And so instead of, helping on drives and collapsing the defense and having spread pick and roll and letting these role players spot up from 3, or letting Devin Booker and Kevin Durant play off each other from 3, if you can sort of make the middle part of the floor inviting or take away other stuff, the Suns, these 3 elite players for the Suns, certainly will take a lot of mid-range jumpers. How much they adjust that, how much they're cognizant of that. I mean, these are not only 3 great players, but 3 pretty cerebral players historically in playoff series. So I don't expect them to take as many mid-range shots as they took in this game. But I actually forgot, Cody, to tell you how many mid-range shots they took. They took 19 threes. I forgot to tell you about the number of mid-range shots. Would you like to guess how many mid-range field goal attempts the Suns took in this game? Would you like to throw up a guess?
Yeah, I want to play this game. So let's say they took 25.
That feels like a good guess to me.
Yeah.
The correct answer is, according to the play-by-play, they took 56 mid-range shots in this game.
No.
56 mid-range shots.
That's not
24
real.
24 were long mid-rangers and 32 were short mid-rangers. That means they only had 7 attempts at the rim the entire day.
No.
I don't think that will last, but again, the math problem there kind of blew my mind because they shot 27 to 56. They shot almost 50% on their 2-point shots. But in today's NBA, more than ever, with the offenses being so good, and we still have to get to the main course when we talk about great offenses, 27 to 56 is not going to cut it. That's under a point per possession.
I do want to be charitable to the Suns, though, because when I'm looking at the starting lineup, we're just reading numbers at this point, right? I'm kind of making these connections right now. The Suns starters seem to do just fine, right? Like looking at plus minus, Ayton was plus 13. Torrey Craig was plus 14. Chris Paul was plus 6. Kevin Durant plus 4. The bench, though. The bench is where things fell apart. Ben, the Phoenix Suns bench scored 8 points. That's a lie. They scored 10 points. The Phoenix Suns bench scored 10 points. Terrence Mann for the Clippers scored 10 points off the bench. Norman Powell off the bench for the Clippers scored 14 points, right? And so, the bench production thing, they only had one bench player play over 10 minutes, right? Landry Shamet played 23 minutes. Everyone else, Jock Landale, 7.5 minutes. Ish Wainwright, 6.5 minutes. Josh Okogie, 6.5 minutes. I don't know. Are they like a 6-man rotation? Really? Like, can you think of another team that was successful in the playoffs with a legitimate 6-man rotation? Like, is this a sustainable strategy for the Phoenix Suns?
Well, the Nick Nurse Raptors, never went more than 7 deep. So it's doable. It's doable. There is something here. I mean, I will throw out a big picture talking point for people to chew on and throw around. There is something here that reminds me a little of the 2011 Heat, where you end up with a roster in the playoffs, and we talk about playoff level players, and what guys are going to be able to perform in the postseason. You end up with a roster where it's like the Heat had the big 3, and then almost just nothing. Where they're literally the 2 other positions more traditionally back in that day. They're like, we need a big man next to Chris Bosh. They wouldn't need that anymore. And then we need a point guard next to LeBron and Dwayne Wade. They wouldn't need that anymore. But those 2 positions on the court, it was anything. Let me get Zydrunas Ilgauskas out of retirement. Let me get Joel Anthony. Let me get, I'm trying to remember who was on that exact team. Carlos Arroyo, Moochie Norris.
Birdman.
I don't know if Birdman was on 11. That's what I mean. That first 2011 team. This is something we could look up with the power of the internet, but it's much more fun to sit around and say names like old men.
Did Mike Bibby get signed?
I think
to that
Mike
team?
Bibby might have been. But this is what I mean. There's a little of this with the Suns where they have these 4 players, and no disrespect to these Torrey Craig, Landry Shamet. These are NBA players. These are some of the best basketball players in the world. But the drop off there in terms of filling out the roster and complementing the roster when you get to the championship or late playoff levels, that's the issue. Josh Okogie, I was surprised he only played 6.5 minutes in this game. I watched some of it in the car, so I couldn't know I wasn't driving. Don't worry, I wasn't driving while I watched it. So I couldn't tell you why he only played 6.5 minutes. I think Ayton hit like 7 mid-range jumpers while I was watching in the car. But that's the kind of thing. I would not expect in game 1 to see the 5 starters, including Torrey Craig, Landry Shamet, and that's about it. As you mentioned, we saw a glimpse of Jock Landale. We saw Ish Wainwright. Bismack Biyombo got a dunk and a block, I think. Terrence Ross made an appearance. Damian Lee somehow still did not get in the game. TJ Warren did not get in the game. This is a fascinating series. So did I change my mind on anything here? I don't know, but I'm just sitting around going, I need to learn more, because if Kawhi terminates and Eric Gordon plays like that and Russell Westbrook becomes a defensive specialist, this is going to be fun.
There were a couple key things, too. I think the Chris Paul factor really fascinating to me, because in the fourth quarter, when it was, it was right down to it, when the game was ready to be taken by either team, like either team could have gone on a 6-0 run or something like that and won it. And Chris Paul got to his spot a couple of times. I think it was Zubats at the time that was in, got to his little pull-up spot. I think one of them he was chased down by someone for a nice little contest, but both of them I'm like, oh, here it is. Chris Paul's going to bury it. But he didn't. And Chris Paul ended up with, 7 points, 6 points, something like that. And if he's not able to hit that mid-range jumper when he needs to at that consistency that we've been used to with him, I think obviously it's not going to bode well for the Suns, but when you have such a small roster that you're playing, you need all of your big guys to be performing. Like that Heat team you're talking about, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, these guys were all 26, 27, 25, like guys that are going to keep going. We're not talking 35, 36, 37, however old these guys are right now. But then at the same time, I think back in like Eric Gordon started off and he had like 11 points in the first 2 seconds of the game. Like he was on fire. But at the end, at that same point when Chris Paul was missing those jumpers, Eric Gordon just botched a couple wide open 3-point attempts at the end there that I think could have sent it clearly for the Clippers to win. So I guess that's my way of saying that this feels pretty even to me right now, and I need one more game to see what's real.
Yeah, the Clippers did win. Just don't forget that.
Yes, the Clippers did win.
Yes, you said if Gordon hit some threes, the Clippers could have won.
They could have. I mean, they did, but they also could have, Ben.
Yes. Okay. We've stalled long enough. We have to talk about what may have been the best opening playoff game of all time. The Kings and Warriors. I think I had a spiritual experience in this game. I could not believe, like, the game started and then 2 hours later it was over and I was like, what just happened? I had no sort of conscious embodiment. I was taken to another plane of existence watching this game, and just to think that there's going to be like 3 or 4 more Cody, how can game 2 or game 3, how can another game in this series repeat the intensity of this game? And is that a possible theme moving forward? Is it possible the Kings have played the entire year to be in better shape than their opponents for the playoffs? Like, what is going to happen in the next game? Will anyone be able to walk by game 3?
I mean, if that's the case, then I'm really... Listen, I wasn't on the pod before the playoffs. I tried to tweet it before the series so it could be out there. I picked the Kings to win this, and I'm not some kind of hero. I'm not a martyr. The Kings are the 3. I don't care about.
You are. You went all the way. You went all the way. Cody is making an allusion to the fact that despite my fence sitting, I ended up leaning Golden State. And if we're talking about what we learned, I actually felt good about leaning Golden State at the end of the day, and I thought the Warriors looked great, and yet they also lost. And it wasn't some, like, Fox's jumper was on, but it wasn't a loss that felt like shooting luck. Let's put it that way. So it was a close game. Close games can go either way. There's a lot of factors in close games. 1 or 2 calls can flip a close game and stuff like that. It came down to the final shot. But what I mean by it wasn't about luck to me is the Kings had their shot quality throughout the game. The Kings ran their offense throughout the game, which is one of the mini themes of the video we did on the game that's out on the Thinking Basketball YouTube channel. And they seem to get stronger with those principles throughout the game. Like, the halftime adjustment, I think might have been the greatest halftime adjustment in the history of the NBA. Mike Brown said, run. That was the halftime adjustment. I just envisioned him like Gandalf up there with a staff, when they're down in the mines of Moria. Yes. That was his halftime speech. Run, you fools. I've been in the other locker room. They will not run as much as us. And the thing about the Kings' pace is it's not a gimmick. They're so well coached and they're so comfortable running their offense. There's a play in the video that really jumps out to me where they try to play 2-man. There's the typical screen away, read, split cut, flow into the 2-man that the Kings have all this movement and continuity, but they also have Sabonis and the dribble handoff stuff. It's taken away. Everything's taken away wonderfully by the Warriors, who I thought Andrew Wiggins looked amazing. Draymond Green played well. They just look great. The Warriors look great. Fox tries to get downhill, wheels by Sabonis. Sabonis gives him the ball. Draymond makes his incredible recovery to help. They're shut off. There's 6 seconds left on the shot clock. And what does Kevin Huerter do? He goes, I'm going to sprint to the top for a ghost screen. Because that's what we do. That's what the Kings do. We don't devolve into isolation. We don't stand around and point at each other. I'm going to go up and move and screen, and that's how we're going to play the entire 24-second shot clock. And Cody, I think that possession was with like 2 or 3 minutes left in the game. It's in the video, so I mean, this is something you can easily reference. But most teams just fall back on isolation there. And that was the play. Actually, it might have been in the final minute. That was the play where Herter brought Curry up and Curry got the key foul that put Fox on the line. That doesn't happen if you stand around. So I just thought the Kings offense was relentless. I thought they got stronger throughout the game. I thought their shot quality was great. And yeah, the Warriors look great and Sacramento still won. So I mean, can game 2 be half as good as game 1?
Here's my question to you, because one of my premises for why I wasn't 100% on board with the Warriors, where I feel a little bit more confident with the Kings, is that, yes, I understand that Draymond Green is a genius-level defender. He's not, I don't think, to the level that he was last year, but he's still, I don't know, top whatever defenders in the league right now. But with the style that the Kings play defense, especially when Sabonis and the main lineups that the Warriors play, Draymond Green's probably going to be on Sabonis, I was thinking, how much of an impact can one person like Draymond Green actually have on the entire offensive lineup that the Kings have? What can this one player do to have that much of an impact? And I guess that's my question to you. What did you feel about Draymond Green's individual impact? Do you think this is going to be a series where his genius is actually mitigated a little bit by the style of offense that the Kings play?
Yeah, to some degree. Sure. But I also think, and I'm wondering if you have changed your mind a little on this. Kevon Looney did a great job on Sabonis. That was probably Sabonis' worst game of the season. And it'll be interesting to see how much Looney plays. I think he got over 30 minutes because there were plays where the pace exposed Looney because he just can't sprint down the court with the rest of these guys. And as the game wore on, the Kings are just grabbing and taking off. And, it's like they're shot out of a cannon. But on the flip side, he did a wonderful job with Sabonis. Now, whether that can hold up, whether Sabonis can make an adjustment, whether he can go 4 for 7 around the basket instead of 1 for 7 or whatever it ended up being, there were some close misses. You mentioned Evan Mobley in the Cavs game. Those kinds of shots, like pretty good shots that in this game you miss 3 or 4. Maybe the next game you make 3 or 4. We will see. But between Draymond and Looney and then Andrew Wiggins, who that guy could roll out of bed, I think, and play basketball after an unlimited time. He looked fantastic, and his length changes everything because they're so small. So when they get Wiggins back, they have a little bit more size, they have a little bit more versatility, they have a little bit more bingo time, Cody, of your favorite thing, rim protection with Andrew Wiggins out there. So I think the answer to your question is yes, because the Sacramento offense is so good and so well distributed with shooters and cutters and playmakers. I think it's hard for Draymond individually to have an incredible impact. So it mitigates that a little bit. But I also thought Golden State did a pretty good job defensively, and it still doesn't matter. I thought the Kings played a good defensive game. They didn't have a ton of gaping issues. The Warriors shot making down the stretch was from a video game. Steph Curry's making threes, falling out of bounds. Klay Thompson, all of a sudden, Klay Thompson's like, hey, do you guys mind if I take some pick and roll, dribble, pull up 30-footers? Is that something that you'd be interested in? Help me out. This series is amazing.
So on the Sabonis point, like you said about Kevon Looney, what's interesting about the way that he defends him, the fact that Kevon Looney isn't very fast and can't really seem to jump very high right now is actually helpful against Sabonis, because Sabonis just wants to bang down low and just kind of keep spinning around and up faking you. And Looney's like, this is all I got, man. This is it. You're going to have to make
I'm not coming out there. You're going to have to come to me. Yeah.
And there was one play where Sabonis, I think he maybe caught it at the top of the key. And he's like, well, I have it here. I'm 18 feet away. Looney's not going to guard me. I guess I should probably shoot it. And he missed it, right? And I think this is the difference between what we saw between Bam Adebayo and how he was able to attack Brook Lopez and DeAndre Ayton and how he was able to attack Zubats. When you're one of these kinds of guys, you have to have like a 15 to 18 foot jump shot. And when you're able to consistently make that shot, not that you want to have like a steady diet of it, but when it comes down to it, you need to be able to fall back on that. And that seems to be another step where Sabonis needs to develop, is just a little bit of a more consistent mid-range jump shot. So somebody like Kevon Looney can't come in and scheme you out of it. Ben, can I ask you, do you know which player, Ben, for the Kings played 13 minutes and was plus 10 after playing 162 minutes during the regular season?
I know this by process of elimination because there aren't that many players on the Kings that played 13 minutes. You didn't need to give me the second clue. He played a great game. It is the one and only Alex Len. They needed a big body. He rebounded. He finished at the rim. Those maybe were the best 13 minutes in NBA playoff history.
He absolutely spiked Draymond Green's shot. Like, he was like, I see your defensive player of the year, and I raise you me, wha, and just throws it out. Like, that was inspired basketball from a guy. And, I know, I was looking back. Alex Len got a little bit more run in the last few games, but it's also not like we were expecting him to have a huge impact against the Warriors in this game. So I'm excited to see more of that. Obviously, I don't want to just sit on Len because, De'Aaron Fox had a tremendous game. Malik Monk, Ben, what are we going to do about Malik Monk? Like, what are we going to do about him?
You mean potentially the best reserve in the league? I mean, if you haven't heard that episode, we did a whole thing on the best bench players, and I felt like I was on Monk Island, population uno, and now I think I'm noticing more spots settle. I'm noticing some signs for people who are building new homes on Monk Island. He had 32 points off the bench. He and Fox combined for 70 points in this game. But we talked about it a ton. I wasn't worried about Monk. He might have some games where he has 8 points or 12 points, but he's a guy who has, to me, shown an ability in his game and his sort of mental approach to step up in the biggest of moments under the highest pressure cooker. The thing I still have a question about is Keegan Murray. Ended up playing 16 minutes, missed all 3 of his threes, didn't look entirely comfortable out there. To a degree, he was a weak link. Kevin Huerter played pretty well, but he didn't get the flow. He missed all 5 of his threes. Was he nervous? One of those guys, I think, has to pop for Sacramento because Trey Lyles is not going to make 4 threes frequently. Trey Lyles has played well off the bench this year, and he gives them another shooter and a stretch option. But I think they need one of those other starters, Cody, whether it's Huerter or Murray, and probably especially Huerter, to have a couple big games, to get a little comfortable, to not kind of be drowned out. Because, I don't know if we've said this explicitly. We talked about the intensity, but the quality of that game, that was like an NBA Finals quality game. The skill making and the shot making and everything. Skill making, I just made up a term, but I'm losing my mind here. That was insane. And you had Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins and De'Aaron Fox and Monk in this heavyweight battle. I think going forward, it'll be interesting to see if Sabonis can turn the tide, not just for a single game with his shot or something, but really find a way to have offensive success in the series. And I think Huerter, more so than Murray, they need one of those guys. Because if not, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see because I think they really need that. Yeah.
No. Couple of points here. On the skill making point here. On the level of skill making they had. I haven't seen anyone else bring this up, right? I almost feel like I dreamed it, Ben. Like during the game, I may have passed out and just like dreamed of this basketball game. I'm still not sure if it was real. There was like 3 minutes left in the first quarter. Davion Mitchell's bringing the ball up. He's like on the right side. He's like 70 feet from the basket. One-handed skip pass to the corner. I don't even remember who was in the corner. I don't know if they shot. I don't know if they made it. But I died for a second because I'm like, Davion Mitchell is just out here throwing 70-foot skip passes, and this is just where we are with the NBA. No offense to Davion Mitchell, but this is not the kind of the player in this kind of role that would be making passes like that in a playoff game. It just blew my mind. And then going back to Malik Monk, something that stood out to me. I'm not usually one that watches post-game pressers. I got nothing against them. I just don't. But this is one where I just I had to turn it on because I couldn't get enough of the game. I just need to keep soaking in it. And something that stood out to me was Mike Brown was talking about Malik Monk. And he had this comment. He was like, I took Malik onto the side and I was like, hey, when you're coming off the pick and roll, if you look, you're going to see some of these guys that are open and we want you to make that pass. But also, I got to trust you and whatever you're going to do. I got to trust your instinct out there. And he's like, I think that's the kind of thing Monk needed to hear. And I think that's the kind of guy you have with Malik Monk. It's like the Manu Ginobili type with Popovich, where Popovich has such a strict way that he wants him to play. But when you have a guy whose instincts are just like, you got to ride or die with it, you got to ride. You just got to go with it. And I really respect Mike Brown for empowering his guy like that.
I apologize to the hardcores for waiting till the end of the episode to get into this. Although maybe on the flip side, that'll incentivize the people to listen all the way through. The adjustments going forward are going to be fascinating, Cody, because on one hand, I don't know if there's a tactical adjustment for the Kings' speed other than just really stop crashing the glass. Like when the shot goes up, everyone run back desperately because the Kings' speed is like a physical attribute that cannot be overcome. It is a lifestyle. It is a mentality. It is, I don't know, there's no tactical adjustment for it other than your rebounding and things like that. The other part is in the half court, the speed they have in the half court, because De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk, no one can stay in front of them. And you're going to need to make a lot of adjustments if you don't have a way to stay in front of those two guys when they have the ball. So that's one side for Golden State. I think they can make some tweaks to the offense. Like I said, they were guarded really well, but maybe they can make some tweaks to the offense. I thought they had a couple slips or backdoors that were available that they didn't hit. The other thing about the intensity in this game is sometimes when you get a game that's that intense that the players aren't used to, they miss passes because everything is happening so fast and so furiously. And that means defensively, you can get away with a little more chaos. I don't know if that's going to hold for the rest of the series, but I do think the biggest adjustment to think about for Golden State will be the lineups. Who guards who plays more? Do they go more small ball? Are you leaning into Looney? Are you leaning away from Looney since he's really their only true big in the equation? He's the guy you have to think about. The Warriors for years have demonstrated an ability to be as flexible as any other team and to sometimes think outside the box. So, maybe I'm wrong when I say there's no tactical adjustment to the speed and the fast break other than just traditional rebounding stuff because I'm looking forward to see what happens. Let's put it this way, because I think history shows us they will try something different.
Is this safe to say that this is the first round series you're most excited about?
Is it not coming through clearly as we record?
I want to hear you say it.
Oh, I said it. I said it on the preview show with Dave. I mean, I just it's an incredible first round matchup. And you said like you weren't sure if you dreamed the game. That's how it feels to me just in terms of the philosophy of basketball, in terms of the direction of basketball, the future of basketball. You have these teams, and I have it in the video on game one, where sometimes it looks like they're mirroring each other. It's like the same play on one end as the other end. And of course, literalists get very mad at me when I say that. They get on the YouTube and they're like, there's no Kevin Huerter's not Klay Thompson. It's like, I know that. I know Kevin Huerter's not Klay Thompson, but you have to understand the styles and the sort of facsimiles that are taking place out there. And these teams play very fast. They play with a lot of movement. They play with a lot of shooters. The Kings also have this dribble handoff, use the big kind of Nikola Jokic thing going on. To have these two forces collide really does have a little bit of a what's it called? An immovable force meets what's that called? An immovable object meets an unstoppable force. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. Now, of course, the Kings' defense isn't up to par, so it doesn't feel like that titanic heavyweight battle in terms of the overall quality of the teams, but in terms of the offense and sort of the offensive tactics and execution, Yeah, this is the bee's knees to me.
I just don't know. I just don't know how the Warriors offense can keep up with the constant Kings. It feels like the Kings have more high level offensive players they can keep rotating out if Steph Curry's not there. Because Ben, like Steph Curry in that fourth quarter made a couple, like that corner three he made. Impossible. It was impossible. Like that happened. Klay Thompson had one of his classic Klay shots. Underrated. Steph Curry had like a split the D, drive in, throws by into someone, kind of windmill up a layup. Impossible shots. He scored 13 points in the fourth quarter. De'Aaron Fox scored 15 points in the fourth quarter. Malik Monk scored 13 points in the fourth quarter. So like Steph Curry's shot making is being matched shot for shot from Fox and Monk. And like, I thought Curry was giving them all they got. Like I was genuinely surprised when his little floater at the end didn't go in. I don't know. I feel more confident in my Kings pick after that first game.
Oh wow, interesting.
Yeah, I do.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, I thought Golden State looked really good. This is, oh boy. We got to get out of here, Cody. There's a couple other series that we haven't discussed. Is there another series where you changed your mind a little bit that you want to mention before we talk next time?
I need to shake my fists at the basketball gods, Ben. I don't want to be blasphemous here, Ben, but I'm hurt. Because a couple weeks ago, maybe like a month ago at this point, I said on this little podcast, you and I were talking, and I was like, Ben, the Miami Heat are interesting. They're coming at you. I've seen them play, and you're like, Cody, they suck. And I'm like, I know.
I would never use such language.
I'm like, they're coming at you. And the basketball gods thank me by matching the Heat up with my Milwaukee Bucks in a game when Giannis goes down with an injury. Ben, it's not fair. I paid my tribute. This should have been the Hawks and Bucks playing in this round. The Heat should be giving the Celtics another 7-game series, but no. This is where we are right now, and I'm genuinely hurt.
I want to respond to what you just said, but I just realized we forgot to talk about the Nets and the 76ers, which I spent all of Saturday morning chronicling this entire video about the incredible double teams that the Nets were running because they're running the exact same peel shifting principles that we talked about in a video a couple months ago. And they did it the whole game, and it was fascinating. And I'm fascinated to see what happens in game 2 or game 3, if there's any adjustments. And it's like, oh, no, guys, that happened Saturday morning. So that was like 4 years ago. So you actually forgot about the existence of those teams. I did not watch the Miami-Milwaukee game because I think Milwaukee is going to win that series. But with Miami being up 1-0, I mean, when Giannis was on the court, he only played 11 minutes, but they were -9. So, you know, to your point about being a Heat truther here, we all know the matchup that took place in the bubble. Now, if I could go back in time and live podcast and recreate me watching the Bucks Heat in the bubble, game 1, I missed most of the game live. I don't remember how much I was able to watch some of game 1, but it was the same thing, right? Didn't the Heat kind of stun them in game 1 in the bubble? And my thought was like, yeah, but the Bucks are better. And then I was watching game 2, and about second quarter of game 2, I started texting people, Milwaukee, we have a problem. So I will be watching game 2, and Cody, you do not want to receive that text from me at halftime of game 2. But I still don't think it's coming. I still feeling pretty good about the Bucks.
You know, I gave up all hope when they were down against the Nets a couple of years ago. I gave up all hope when they were down 0-2 against the Suns in the final. So we've been in tougher positions. I can whip out the LeBron and being like, I've been in tough positions. This isn't one of them. But there were, I don't know. I was just really impressed with Miami. Like, Chris Middleton at times really went into his bag. He was going back to his old Chris Middleton tricks, backing guys down, hitting tough mid-range jumpers. And I thought their shot making was good. Like, it seemed like they were mounting a comeback a couple times in the fourth. And the Heat just responded, man. Like, there was was no time the Bucks could really get it in with like 8 points because Butler would come back and make some kind of play. Or I think Caleb Martin hit like a couple of and one driving layups, and everyone just kind of pitched in and was doing stuff. Bam, I was impressed with his no hesitation mid-range jumpers, which I think is the only way to really counter Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez should probably be posted up more. Like, I think if Giannis isn't in there, the Bucks need to lean on Brook being a little bit bigger
on offense.
in the paint.
He should be posted up on offense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He needs to be doing that more. So I think there's a lot of things that can be different, and obviously the Giannis variable is we got to see what's happening there.
Yeah, who knows if he'll play in the next game or miss a game. Contusion, fancy word for bruise. So hopefully that's nothing nagging, chronic, or long-term. But just looking at the box score, just to kind of center myself, I think if Jimmy Butler has an efficient 35-point, 11-assist game going forward in the series, that might be a concerning situation for Milwaukee. I think if the Heat post a 126 offensive rating, and well, they did go 15 of 25 from downtown, so that's probably not going to happen. I did not even realize that 15 of 25 from downtown. That is quite ridiculous.
Look at what the Bucks shot from downtown.
The Bucks, it's a classic game one Bucks, 11 of 45 from downtown. See, I'm even less worried now that I've seen these numbers. Of course, unfortunately, Tyler Hero, who, he was putting up numbers. He will be out for the series. So that's a pretty big blow to Miami, even with Butler and Bam playing like that. So are you saying, for the record, officially, that you are concerned about your Milwaukee Bucks?
I mean, of course. I mean, if you're a fan, you're always concerned. Like, being a fan is just being in a state of being scared all the time. Like, you're never satisfied until it's over and you're holding the trophy. So, am I more concerned than I was 2 days ago? Absolutely. But like, you can't ask me to do this in like a thoughtful way right now.
If you want to support this show, check out patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. That's where you can find those predictions that I mentioned. We also have our live monthly Q&A coming up at the end of the month, where that's a lot of fun, where our Discord community gets together and asks me a bunch of questions. I was going to say about the playoffs, but usually during the playoffs, they like to ask me questions about the 1976 Boston Celtics. I texted Cody after the game. I was like, I can't believe how good that Kings-Warriors game has been. The whole weekend was incredible. I said, when do you think the last time there was a game that was that good in the NBA playoffs? And he said the year was 1976. So just warming up for the Q&A. Patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. Thanks, as always, for listening all the way through on this one. And, of course, now with the playoffs going, I hope you are having an extra special great